this is one thing I've noticed. People are very naive about their thoughts when it comes to government. Like, people view the government and they see, oh, well, it's probably just the Republicans over here and the Democrats over here. That's just how it works, and they somehow coalesce to find middle ground. And the only reason we don't have anything real, like, come in terms of change coming out now is just because things are so partisan. Things are so divided. The country's so divided. That's the only reason why we don't have real change and that people die and that, our government's largely a failure because people are so divided. It's such a divided country. So much division. So we need unity. People think like that. Like, people genuinely think like that. And it really blows my mind because it's, by believing that, you're dividing yourself. Because by believing that, you're then picking a side. They always pick a side once you actually buy into that framework. You know what I'm saying? Like, once you buy into the framework that, the system's just so divided. But I'll tell you what, I can't stand Trump. Never Trump. And you pick a side. Same thing could go for Biden and go for whoever the Democratic candidate is. And it's just like this little two-party thing. They have the little media arm for every party. And, they spread out the little propaganda with the little tentacles. And that's just how it is. But then there's a whole bunch of people who don't fit in any of that. I put myself in that camp. I don't believe in any of it. I don't believe in this two-party system. I think it's fundamentally rigged. And this gets to the larger point, bro. Everyone should be disgusted with the government, not just those who are disaffected, those who don't vote, those who are considered on the fringe when it comes to the mainstream political spectrum, when it comes to the DC pundits and what they got to say. All the people who are considered the fringe with the DC and the New York elite, and when it comes to just people who don't vote and don't care and think this whole system's rigged, all of us, you should join us. You should join us. And stop thinking that everything's kumbaya, that everything's just so simple. This government should disgust you, bro. And I want people to look at the perfect example of what happened with the coronavirus pandemic. Let's just say it's a little case study for us. Why don't we go down memory lane just a little bit, only by a couple of weeks, all right? So we have this pandemic. We have cases skyrocket, right? Just at the start of the pandemic. Obviously, right now, the cases have plateaued and it's disastrous. But before, right, when you're talking about the cases skyrocketing and, everyone's like scared, the world's ending, oh my God, right? And then you had businesses shutter. You had public places closed. You had schools closed. Everything, business as usual, came to a halt. The economy, the entire American economy shuttered, paused. Now, let's look at this here. What is the government supposed to do? What are they supposed to do in this situation? Is the government supposed to, I don't know, make sure that if businesses close, they don't have to lay off half of their workers? If businesses close and they have to cut wages, if they become unemployed and if their wages are cut, there's a paycheck protection program that has adequate funds to ensure that people can receive all of their compensation, keep a roof over their head, not starve. Instead, the government's probably supposed to not give trillions to their corporate friends and the large corporations with little to no oversight, but instead give those trillions in jobs programs, in ensuring that small businesses have the loans that they need, in ensuring that if people get the coronavirus, they can get the treatment, in ensuring that we have the adequate number of ventilators, ensuring that we have the adequate number of ICUs. But no. What ended up happening? They prioritized the corporations. And I'm not going to sit here and act like this was a completely balanced thing. The Democrats did it just as much as the Republicans. But the Democrats still did it. The Republicans were at the forefront. But you still had Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer holding them up. Don't get it twisted. The Democratic establishment pushed for that corporate bailout just as much as the Republicans did. But it was a matter of the humanitarian things on the side, the little crumbs that we got. The Democrats wanted a bigger crumb. They wanted you to get like a little nibble off the cookie. The Republicans wanted you to get nothing. That's the difference. That's the difference. It's because of their efforts that we got a $1,200 check. But it's also because of their efforts that we got a $4 trillion corporate bailout for the large corporations, for Boeing, for the service industry, for all those little goons, with Steve Mnuchin just to divvy it up. A Goldman Sachs executive to divvy it up with little to no oversight. That's how it goes. That's how it goes in DC. So now, what are the consequences of that? Because of this imbalanced bailout, where they gave us a one-time $1,200 payment, where they gave an underfunded Small Business Administration just a little bit more, just little crumbs. Gave paycheck protection programs, gave it a little bit of crumbs, right? And then gave all the rest of the funds to the huge corporations with no oversight. What are the consequences of that? Well, what you see now are food banks, literally with people wrapping around in lines. Yeah, demand for food banks in New York City went up and doubled. Doubled! Westchester County tripled! In Dallas, output went up by 70%. You had people wrapping around the block. Great Depression type scenes. In the middle of a pandemic. They didn't care if they caught the virus. They needed food. These are now the decisions that people have to make. They have to decide between, oh, do I pay for health insurance and ensure that if I get the virus, I don't die? Or do I risk going bankrupt paying for treatment for the virus so I can feed my children? Because I lost my job and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell and all the goons up in Washington, D.C. did jickety-jack nothing for me. Gave me little crumbs. Did you know that 10%, lower than 10% of small businesses didn't even receive a loan from the Small Business Administration? That's how inadequately underfunded they were. That's how disastrous their efforts were. They gave so much to the corporations, $500 billion that could be leveraged into $4 trillion, but then gave the Small Business Administration crumbs. The Paycheck Protection Program, crumbs. So many Americans, and disproportionately lower income Americans and minority Americans, weren't able to cash in on that $1,200 check. So they got nothing. They're sitting at home, scared and confused. Some sitting in the street now, newly sitting in the street, scared and confused and starving. People going to food banks because they have run out of options. That's the situation that Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Mitch McConnell, and all of the government establishment, not just the Democratic establishment, not just the Republican establishment, that's the situation they put us in. Where you have 26 million people unemployed, upwards of 20% unemployment probably by now. When you have the economy literally hemorrhaging, and it's all coming out of the working class, not the 1%. Even though they own all the wealth. But it's going to be us who feel the adverse effects. It's going to be us who starve. Us who lose the jobs. Us who feel the pain. That's how it goes in America. Because this government is rigged. This government should disgust you. Don't you ever buy into the two-party framework again. Because that's not how it works. The little naive game that they want to portray to you. Oh, you have the Democrats over here and the Republicans over here. And to work, they got to find middle ground. Understand, buddy. Their interests are never going to be you. Their number one concern will never be people like you and me. It will be the corporations who funded their campaign. The corporations who's going to give them cushy lobbying gigs once they're done. The corporations are going to give them cute executive gigs once they're done. The corporations that many of them largely came from. That is how the game works. They care about Wall Street. They care about Big Pharma. They care about the insurance companies. They care about the oil companies. They care about corporate industry. They care about big tech. They care about corporate industry. But they don't give a rat's ass about you and me. And there's no clear evidence that in the worst crisis in modern American history, in terms of the scale, in terms of the impact, in terms of the economic crisis, the survival crisis, when you have thousands of people dropping every single day, the government stood by their corporate friends. The government gave us crumbs and instead stood by their corporate friends, gave them trillions and gave us crumbs. People are now starving because Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Mitch McConnell, all in the Republican establishment, they didn't have the guts turn their back on their corporate friends. You should be disgusted. And most of all, you should start to act. Wake up! Wake up! The system's rigged, buddy. The system's rigged. And it's going to crush you if you let it. So let's do something about it. Get in the streets. Have your voice heard. Let's act. Let's protest. Let's demonstrate. Tell your friends to come out and vote. Spread the message that the system is rigged and the only solution is progressive change.
Chillin' with the boys, yeah, we making all this noise. Can't complain, riding in the fast fast lane. To the top, we don't stop up till past 5 o'clock. Smoking.